Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Annemie Ress, the founder at PurpleBeach and managing director and COO at Inogy Innovation Hub. Annemie has been both an operator and an investor, and she has also been a former people leader at amazing companies like eBay, Skype, PayPal, PepsiCo, among others. Annemie, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise. So let's get to know a little bit more about you. So who is Annemie Ress?
Yeah, so sometimes I feel a bit schizophrenic, right? Because on the one hand, I, at Inogy, where I'm managing director of our fund, work on both sourcing, investing, and really growing, scaling startups that are focused on the future of energy. We fundamentally believe that the future of energy will be technology enabled. And so we work across London, Silicon Valley, Berlin, and Tel Aviv to find the cutting edge startups and businesses that can help accelerate the energy transition. And the really interesting thing there is that we don't only focus on energy related startups. We actually look at adjacent sectors, enablers, etc. So it's really fascinating just seeing such amazing talent and businesses out there on a regular scale. And yeah, we were just saying traveling and seeing them in future will be interesting. We're going to have to think about how we have virtual pitches, how we virtually connect with, businesses, etc. But that's a separate topic. And then after my time at eBay, PayPal, and Skype, I also started my own business, which is PurpleBeach. And we focus on helping traditional corporates to really innovate around their business models, which is very opportune based on where we are today. For what we call the new normal. How do they get ready? And more often than not, those businesses also connect in with startups across the world to help them with that. And so what I wanted to say was, I've been an entrepreneur. It's hard. So I've sat on both sides of the fence and got a lot of war scars and lessons learned.
Absolutely. And it's amazing when I have a guest like you, because we started the show covering the typical venture packets cycle, going from, let's say, the scale up stage, 1 million to 100 million, getting there from 5 to 7 years, venture packets. And then we started covering companies like Qualtrics was acquired by SAP, going from 100 million to 1B. And now we are covering companies like BASF, Bayer, Schneider Electric, among others, going from 1B to 1-3, being 1-3 the inspirational threshold, because the largest company in the planet nowadays, by the recordings, is Walmart with 540p, half a trillion. So still a long way to go to a trillion in revenues. I think that Apple and Microsoft already.
Yeah, this week
there.
I think it was announced. Yeah.
Exactly. Perfect. And so you cover all those stages. That's the point that I wanted to make. And let's go to the 3 critical ingredients that we always comment on the show. And you are more than allow it, and we would even appreciate to challenge them and say that we should cover another 3 ingredients. So number 1, radical focus. Number 2, world-class leadership. And number 3, a culture of execution. Starting with number 1, radical focus. Everyone has been preparing their plans for 2020, and in China in December and January, things become a little bit shaken, and in the rest of the world, I would say early March, things become much more different, and we have been aligning to the new situation during the last weeks. So a lot of reassessing, refocusing, going to war mode. And I believe that radical focus is even more important during wartime, during the pandemic crisis. So how do you help, and also with your people background, how do you help a team and leaders to go from one mindset to another, and how to redefine critical priorities for the year with so much uncertainty, so we don't know if we should go for the worst case of 2 years with the worst case of 6 months, or with the worst case of September. Now it's becoming a little bit more clear, but just 5 or 6 weeks ago, it was impossible to get to know this. And we are recording this episode on May 1st. This is relevant to say to the audience. Annemie, sorry for the long question.
No. Yes, I think your first rule, which is a radical focus, I would just add one thing to that, which is radical focus with no compromise. And that doesn't mean one is inflexible, but it just means that once you decide to go down a path, don't compromise on your people choices, your product choices, and what you want to do for your customer. And I think that is both true, both in terms of wartime and in terms of our normal, times that we face. And I think for me, where I learned those lessons the hardest, where it was when I was working in businesses like eBay, PayPal, and Skype, when they were scaling, when they were very young. And I can put up my hand that I think one of the biggest lessons I learned there was not to compromise on people and talent. And so I think the businesses that will be successful will be the ones who have this radical focus. But even now you have to have radical focus on finding the right people, because the right people can help you in the good times, in the challenging times, in the super amazing times. So you should always overhire. But that was not the point I was going to make. So how do I try and advise the businesses that we work with? Well, for me, the first thing is really, it's a mindset topic as well. I think we all have choices. I think we have to be realistic around the huge amount of challenges that we will face, both commercially and personally. I think life will never be the same again. However, we now have the choice to say, I am going to radically focus on how bad everything is and just hunker down and try and save and secure my business. Or what I've seen with some amazing founders, a couple out of Israel as well that I'm thinking about now that we recently worked with, they stopped and said, look, how can we respect the reality of the situation, but also turn it into an opportunity to really either make a difference in the world or offer a new connection opportunity with our customers. So that's what I've seen in the startup context, and then what I've actually seen in some of the bigger corporates that we work with. In that context, I've seen that actually the ones that are different are the ones who are sending their sales teams out to talk to customers, not to sell to them at the moment, but to say to them, how can we help you? So that radical focus is around really still, once again, putting people at the front and center of everything, whether it's your team, whether it's your customers, embracing a mindset of the possible, which really could be hard. I know it can be hard in these circumstances, but you know what, if you choose to embrace that mindset whilst being realistic that it's super hard and you're going to have to make amazingly significant trade-offs and decisions that aren't going to be easy, I think that will help people get through this both commercially and personally. And then the one other point I would say in terms of radical focus is, yes, it's important to focus on what's happening now, but actually it's more important to focus on what comes after. And again, the businesses and the startups that I see who are going to come out of this really well are the ones that are able to think both of how to navigate through what is today, but actually also already to anticipate, hence those conversations with customers. What will come out of this? How will it look different? How will customer needs have changed? And so, sailing the ship through today, but also focusing on tomorrow.
Absolutely. And we have been talking a lot about that. This is a stage that we need to remember about the Everest, to repeat the vision, the mission, and the values, and even more than repeating them, showing them and leading by example. So it's very easy to panic and completely forget the very big vision.
Sorry, my alarm.
That's perfect. So it's a very good point that you are definitely doing. So and number two is related with what we are just discussing, which is world-class leadership. Yeah. And it's related with about being that example. And as you were anticipating, we always like to discuss the article from Ben Horowitz of the Wartime CEO and the
Yeah.
peacetime CEO, and you already anticipated discussing radical focus, that great teams are good for wartime and peacetime and for all times. But do you think that we need to have any adjustments? And as a leader, I think that we are seeing some leaders emerging out of wartime. And talking about specifically scale-ups, I see some CEOs that are having a lot of fun, because especially when scaling up, they get a little bit bored, because now they feel themselves as employees of their own companies, and they can't be so rebels and pirates as they were in the past. They need to bring out people that know more than themselves and let them lead. So this is very complex for a founder who has been always in wartime. And so now they are having fun. So I need to come back again. I need to make decisions, etc., etc. So what is your view on how leaders are shaping, on your portfolio, are shaping this crisis, and how they are adjusting in terms of leadership style to this situation?
Yeah, and I think, again, I've seen amazing, sorry, I just want to make sure this doesn't go off again. I've seen amazing examples of CEOs just jumping into the mix, connecting at a very, very human level with their customers and startups, and authenticity is key. What I do, however, want to say is, I think the future we're going into, as well as where we are today, I think you can't only think of being a wartime or a peacetime CEO. I think you almost have to be I think now more than ever, you're going to have to discover what is your own authentic leadership style, and then be your own person. It's not, and I don't know if that really makes sense, but what I've seen in terms of startups and big corporations, the leaders that are followed most by people are the ones who simply at this point in time are authentic, can say, I don't know how this is going to end, but this is my plan. Some days they're inspiring, some days they're they're taking the charge, they're in control. I think it's a much more complex model of leadership that is evolving. Not to say that leadership model of wartime, peacetime is incorrect, but as I look now, I think the real ones who actually navigate through all of this are the ones that can adapt, and not, you don't have long chunks of time where you're a wartime CEO and then a peacetime CEO. You're literally that minute by minute. And I think the people who can build that muscle to know in the given minute, what do I need to do and how do I need to act and adapt my style, I think they're the ones, I see them as the ones who are, most able to navigate through this and take their people on the journey with them. And then I think that human connection, I think there's been, and I don't know if this goes with wartime or peacetime, but it comes down to humans, right? So the CEOs that I've seen have done the best are the ones that, despite the technologies, in spite of having Zoom team calls, etc., somehow still reaching through the technology and are able to connect with their people at a very human level. So an example, we did it recently. We just sent everybody a little postcard that's, and that's in the post, the snail mail, a postcard that said, here's a picture of the good times. We know it's really difficult. We're there for you. Come and talk to us anytime you want to. Or I've seen some CEOs, again, in Israel, make donations to the community on behalf of employees. So I think it's all those little, we can have these fancy ideas of wartime and peacetime CEOs, but I would say forget all of that at this point in time and in future, especially where we're really going to operate increasingly through technology. The greatest leaders will be the ones who can treat their individuals in their teams as individuals, their customers as well, and really make a human connection and a difference, not only in the world, but your teams should feel that you're making a difference to their lives on a daily basis. And you're not simply treating your Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Blue Jeans calls as transactional calls where you just get stuff done, right? And so it's not, I think the picture is much less clear, but for me the key insight is we all need to develop a muscle that minute by minute we're going to be required to act very, very differently.
That's really amazing. And let's go out of script a little bit here, which is there are some scale-ups who might be worried about their situation and regarding cash and so on. And I would say that the ones who are exposed to enterprise clients, this might be even a very good opportunity because digital transformation is accelerating and a lot of products that are suited for to sell to large corporates might be even more relevant now than in the previous times. At the same time, for corporates, and you also have that art, this is also a huge opportunity and a huge need to collaborate even more with scale-ups. So this might be the perfect storm to be even more engaged, more collaborative, working more together regarding investment, collaboration, partnerships, clients, providers, etc. So what's your view on that?
My view is, and I think we need to, I don't know if it's whether we all come together as scale-ups and as corporates to redefine what the rules of the game are. That's the one point I have to make, because we always know it's not easy for traditional corporates to work with scale-ups and vice versa. It doesn't only mean the corporates are challenging, but sometimes the scale-ups, if you don't have experienced teams, it's really difficult to make that relationship work. So for me, it almost feels as if and I can see the lines blurring between what is a traditional corporate and where does a scale-up start, and organizations and businesses in future really will be quite different to what we see them today. And that's why I say, I wonder where we can have a dialogue around what that collaboration can look like in future, which is much more than what it was in the past and needs to be much more than it was in the past. And in order for it to work in future, I think corporates will have to adapt and change even faster. It's not just simply a question of resolving their technology challenges by bringing startups on board. That totally won't work. I think I've said a few times this week that I think the key opportunity, or the way in which we all need to work when it comes to redefining this relationship, is we're going to have to do it like flying an aeroplane and change the engine on the go. So it's somehow going to have to happen very, very quickly. So there's education for me, rethinking their business models, how they work, actually needs to happen on both sides. Otherwise, I think the huge opportunity is there, but I don't think it will be partially materialized, but the true potential will not be unlocked unless we start thinking differently about how does business work? How do we define business models? How do we define collaboration, etc.?
Yeah, and just picking your investor art and also your coaching and advisor art, there is this kind of perception that enterprise-oriented scale-ups will suffer less than SMB-oriented scale-ups. So what's your view on that? And excluding, of course, the dramatic verticals like travel, airlines, and so on, that even in enterprise, it might be tricky to get good results in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah, so I don't know whether anybody can answer that question yet today, right? If I could, I probably would be.
I was expecting that.
What I can say, though, is I think everyone will thrive, no matter what stage you are, what box you play in, if you get outside of your box and start thinking very differently about your customers, about your business model, about what normal is, etc. And this might sound so obvious, but I don't really see a lot of people doing it. And that goes back to the earlier point I made around, for all of those that you've mentioned, the ones that are going to be successful are the ones that are navigating through today, but are also already creating tomorrow through the things that they start doing today to navigate this crisis, right? So everything you do shouldn't just be crisis control, but it should be part of a building block towards your future and a different way of working. And I think that holds true for everybody. And I'm quite curious to see what new models of collaboration and commerce will emerge out of this. I think we're just literally at the very, very beginning of it.
And picking now your investor art, will your sourcing efforts, your investments will increase, decrease, keep in the same level? So what's your view, and how active are you during these weeks?
Yeah, I think one needs to be responsible. And I think your first responsibility goes to your current portfolio companies. And so I think that the key focus is on making sure that we navigate and steer and help them to tap into all the wealth of resources and funding opportunities that are out there, that we stay consistent and that we support them. Probably sourcing will be slower, to be quite frank. But sourcing never stops, as you know, right? You can't stop your sourcing. You still need to build the pipeline, be connected. And again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. I'm quite curious about how we can do that much more effectively digitally, right? And so whilst the focus is on helping your existing portfolio companies, I think at the same time, one always needs to keep an eye open, and no one will ever say no to investing in something that truly is amazing or breakthrough, right? So, and again, this comes back to where I think startups really or scale-ups, right? Any businesses during this point in time really need to be so crisp on what is their USP in terms of their customers, their product, their technology offering. You need to stand out, because in a world where sourcing and investment might be slower, the ones that will get that sourcing, funding and investment will be the ones that are solving the world's big customer problems, I think, or even the world's biggest problems, and are truly unique.
Got it. And let's move to the third critical ingredient to scale, a culture of execution. And working from home is now the new normal, and we don't know for how many weeks it will be. We see that China is some weeks ahead of us, with some speakers from China in previous show episodes. But given your very good understanding of, again, culture, and also combining that you are, and I've experienced it myself several times with you, you are so organized and so productive as a leader. So you take very good time of the way you lead your meetings, the way you lead your agenda, and so on. So, and you were saying before, now it's not only about getting things done and getting to meetings and go for the agenda and accomplish the 5 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds and get out of the meeting. We also need to have those kind of relationship building, nurturing, understanding if people are well. So what are some of the rhythms that are helping you to keep building, to keep nurturing that culture and those values that will make your business strong?
Yeah, I think it's not easy, right? So, and I don't think it comes naturally. And what I've seen in terms of the last couple of weeks, and I've seen this globally when speaking to people, is that whilst in the beginning people were a bit like, oh, this is interesting, we're going to do Zoom now. And, we'll have our meetings over Zoom. And then the realization was, actually it works. This is amazing. Oh, Zoom has a new background. Microsoft Teams, let's change all our backgrounds, and that's fun.
Exactly.
What I'm now starting to see is people are getting a little bit tired. And I think the ones I'm noticing, and this is just my personal experience, that are getting tired are people who sit in front of their laptop the whole day, come into the room and not, take, yeah, exactly, right. I'm equally guilty. But it's, at a personal level, one has to be much more thoughtful around the boundaries, that you put in place, connections, getting up, taking care of yourself emotionally, physically, all that kind of good stuff. And then I think what also works is having a bit of spontaneity. So we have coffee meetings, or, sometimes just phone someone as opposed to seeing them on Zoom, or, right. You know what I mean? I think it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because let's face it, we don't always want to show our face on camera, right? Absolutely. And I've found if I just give someone a phone call nowadays, they're like, oh, you're phoning me just to chat to me. Yes, there's still another way of communicating. And so if I have to summarize it, I would say it's around, again, what I said earlier, that human connection, that spontaneity, balancing that with, you have to have a very different rhythm and rigor in terms of being disciplined, that you don't only sit in front of your computer, but that you replicate your offline day as well. I think it's also kind of good to have a little bit of fun and show some vulnerability sometimes, right? I'm sure we've all had calls in our pajamas, although no one would have known about it. But let's have a little bit of fun with the technology as well. But forget everything that I've said. It's like, I think you have to take care of yourself as a leader, because if you start then also mirroring and showing to teams, that it's not just about this relentless Zoom fest, but that you're still willing to reach out and connect to them at a human level, surprise them, etc. Recreate those moments where you just would have gone for a coffee with someone. I mean, that's super important, because I am starting to see people saying, oh, it was cool, but actually now I'm starting to feel quite isolated and I want to see people, and actually it's quite boring because I don't know what day of the week it is, or, you know, and so, you know, I think that element of surprise, human connection, all of that, but with an underlying rhythm that keeps you still getting up and productive, is super important.
That's awesome. And we come to the last question of the show, which is, I will let you define the moment in time that you'd like to ask this question to your younger self. But if you would have the opportunity to meet Annemie at the beginning of eBay, Skype, PayPal, PepsiCo, or even Inoji or PurpleBeach, you decide the moment. What advice would you give to your younger self at that time?
Enjoy every moment, the good and the bad, right? So be in the moment. Don't be so focused on what comes next. Even if you're working on what comes next, I think it's really important, because what you have today, you'll never have again. You can't have tomorrow today yet, and yesterday is gone. So I think it's about absolutely being so present with every single experience. That would be the first thing. And the second thing would be really to embrace a mindset of abundance, what is possible, always choosing that, as opposed to, and I've really tried to do that, as opposed to focusing on what's not possible or why I can't do something. So I think those would be the two things. Be present, but really present. Enjoy the good, enjoy the bad. And really embrace abundance. That something is always possible.
Love it. Annemie, thanks so much for making the time to share your experience with us. The community and myself, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Take care.
And to our community, thanks for being on that side. We keep bringing you the best of the best experiences, the best playbooks, the best tools, so you can thrive during peacetime and wartime, and leverage this amazing opportunity to keep scaling, or be stronger to keep scaling after the crisis. See you soon. Keep scaling.